Bioscience Boardroom: Science of an Outbreak and Business of Vaccine Development. When the coronavirus outbreak struck, global economies ground to a halt almost overnight. As cases and deaths began exploding around the world, scientists and researchers scrambled to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. But the development of a vaccine takes both time and money. And sometimes one or both of those things run out. Take the story of the 2000 Walkerton E. coli contamination, for example. When almost half of the residents of a quiet community in southern Ontario began to fall violently ill, and all within a short 2-week period, it began the story of Canada's worst ever E. coli contamination. 6 deaths, 2 criminal convictions, and a class action lawsuit were just some of the consequences of this tragic incident. Officials reeled at the staggering toll, and not just the estimated 155 million Canadian dollars it was estimated to have cost. But what's the real cost of an outbreak? And with the benefit of hindsight, what could we have done better? Welcome to Bioscience Boardroom, the convergence of the lab and the executive process. The brainchild of scientist turned high-power business consultant Susan Goebel, Bioscience Boardroom bridges the gap between the sciences and the complex world of business operations through sound market knowledge and the strategic mentorship of a proven professional. If you're a scientist, a business owner, or even a hopeful entrepreneur trying to upskill your corporate acumen, you've come to the right place. Bioscience Boardroom, it's the smart decision. In this video series, we explore both the timeline of the 2000 Walkerton E. coli outbreak and the years of private and government investment spent in preventing future outbreaks. We analyze funding models, research development, and bureaucratic red tape, all in the search for infectious diseases' holy grail, a vaccine. So in the first video of this series, let's go back to where it all began. The timeline, the decisions, the money, and the mistakes. So, what happened? On the 17th of May 2000, in the small community of Walkerton, Ontario, the first hint of an emerging health crisis was at the local high school. An abnormally high number of students were reported as absent, 7 of them being treated at the Walkerton Hospital the same day for various gastrointestinal symptoms, including bloody diarrhea and cramps. On the other side of town, the Walkerton Public Utilities Commission, or PUC, received the lab results of their routine water sample taken 2 days earlier. The results confirmed a dangerous level of E. coli contamination. At the time, and for reasons that will soon become pretty obvious, the PUC decided not to inform Walkerton's health officials. Without this early warning, the illnesses weren't immediately recognized as part of a larger pattern, despite patient numbers increasing day on day. But by May the 19th, outbreaks had been reported at schools, retirement homes, doctors' offices, and the hospital had fielded over 100 calls from patients complaining of severe gastroenteritis. The region's medical office, or MHO, noticed the trend and contacted the PUC about the possibility that the town's water supply had become contaminated. They were very quickly assured that the water was safe, and the investigation was soon diverted to other contamination vectors, including produce and meat products. Not long after denying any issues with the water supply, PUC manager Stan Coble began flushing the entire system and increasing chlorination levels in the hopes of eradicating the contamination before any further positive tests could be conducted. By the 20th of May, the initial trickle of patients had turned into a steady stream, with 40 more admitted to Walkerton Hospital with bloody diarrhea and related symptoms. It was spreading too. Hospitals in 2 neighboring towns had each seen 1 case, and the numbers were rising. Medical staff had seen this before. Suspicious they were treating clusters of symptoms consistent with an E. coli infection, physicians collected stool samples from infected patients for analysis. Early lab testing confirmed the diagnosis: Escherichia coli 0157H7. E. coli, while perfectly harmless to its bovine host, plays havoc with the digestive system of humans, causing abdominal cramps and acute hemorrhagic diarrhea. But that's just in a mild case. The more severe cases experienced kidney failure and even death. And to make matters worse, up until this point, doctors and physicians had been prescribing an anti-diarrhea medication to ease patient discomfort. This medication actually exacerbates E. coli infections, potentially causing fatal hemolytic uremic syndrome. An urgent treatment update plan was broadcast to all hospitals and medical facilities in the region, while the MHO moved to take independent water samples to confirm the source. By May the 21st, with thousands of sick residents, the MHO officially warned the Walkerton region not to drink untreated tap water. 2 days later, on May the 23rd, lab tests confirmed the town's water supply had been contaminated with E. coli, and health authorities moved swiftly to contain it. But it was too little, too late. By the end of the outbreak, 2,300 of the 5,000 Walkerton residents had become infected, with 6 deaths and 22 children with permanent chronic kidney damage. So how did this happen? One of 3 town supply wells, named Well 5, was eventually identified as the source of the outbreak. Well 5 was a shallow limestone bore well drilled only about 6 to 7 meters into the ground, and for this reason, when it was commissioned, engineers advised to pay special attention to any possible contamination from agricultural runoff. A week before the outbreak, heavy rainfall had inundated cattle pastures that surrounded Well 5, with E. coli-infested cow manure seeping into the soil. Researchers believe that the contaminated groundwater gradually found its way down to the 6-meter-deep aquifer. Now, although Well 5 was chlorinated, the PUC historically and routinely used less chlorine than required, and bacteria quickly overwhelmed the system. It also didn't help that for more than 20 years, it had been the unspoken practice of PUC employees to make fictitious entries in their daily operating sheets, fudging test results to comply with regulatory standards. So what was the fallout? 2 sanitation officials, Stan and Frank Coble, eventually pled guilty to a charge of common nuisance through a plea bargain and were jailed. The PCU was dissolved, and the Ontario Clean Water Agency took over operations and responsibility for the cleanup. A billion-dollar class action lawsuit was filed and approved, with every resident or visitor affected by the contaminated water supply to receive at least $2,000 with no cap. While conservative estimates put the total cost of the outbreak at 155 million Canadian dollars, the annual cost of E. coli infections in Canada is estimated in one study to be as much as $403 million as of 2013. Hundreds of millions of dollars was and continues to be spent fighting, preventing, and trying to develop vaccines to combat E. coli in the aftermath of the 2000 Walkerton outbreak. Although the outbreak was over, the story didn't end there. The hunt for the vaccine over the next 15 years is just as captivating as the outbreak itself, and we'll be covering it in detail in the rest of the series. The research, the trials, the government funding, and bureaucratic red tape all provide an invaluable case study in business management and grant lobbying. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. You're welcome to leave any questions you may have in the comments. For a closer look at the brains behind Bioscience Boardroom and to explore a range of her qualifications, achievements, and services, be sure to check out Susan's website at www.susangoebel.ca. Keep checking in for the next video in the Bioscience Boardroom series.